Hello, ghouls, and welcome to the fourth full episode of Shrouded in Darkness. I am your true crime-obsessed host, Marlena. As always, we will start with our disclosure. All the stories I share contain material that I've personally researched. Some episodes will contain disturbing material, and along with what I research, I'll also share my own thoughts on the case. Please understand that it is not our intention to offend or upset anyone. At Shrouded in Darkness, we're here to educate, discuss, and bring fresh light to cases. When we're able to, we will put focus towards the victims because those are the names that should always be remembered. As mentioned in our last case, we are sticking to our cases in Alabama, and today's story is about Daniel Lee Siebert. Daniel was born June 17, 1954, in Illinois. It's believed that he had a very tragic upbringing, being physically and sexually abused by his father. When he was 11 years old, his mother left his father, and he had high hopes for a positive change. But that unfortunately didn't last long. His mother continued a life of instability by bringing home different men quite frequently. The one positive thing we know from Daniel's childhood was he had a very good talent for art, and that does play into his life later on. In 1968, Daniel was sent to a boys' home. It's believed that around this same time was when his life of crime began. A few years later, in 1971, he runs away, lives on the streets, develops an awful drug problem, and works as a male prostitute. At one point, he attempts to join the Marines, but he doesn't fit in. He eventually goes AWOL, and after 12 months, he's honorably discharged. By 1972, Daniel is living in California and has a son and a daughter. Little is known about this time of his life. I've not been able to find many details on anything relating to a family of his. We do know, though, that he had a very hard time keeping a steady job, and he resorts to a life of crime. He goes back to that same lifestyle he knows. We fast forward to 1978, and we find Daniel in Las Vegas. He begins a relationship with a man, and it's described as being very volatile. The following year, during some kind of argument or fight, Daniel stabs his boyfriend, and he stabs him 29 times. Somehow, during the trial, Daniel manages to convince the jury that it was a crime of passion. So, again, for some reason, he was charged with only manslaughter, and he is sentenced to 10 years in prison. 3 years after that prison sentence, Daniel is on work release, and he manages to escape back to California. He steals a car and a handgun, he kidnaps a woman, and he forces her into his car. Fortunately, though, she does survive by managing to escape the moving car. Interestingly, not related to that, within 24 hours, Daniel is arrested for harassing prostitutes. At this point, he is extradited to Nevada, and another year is added to his original 10-year sentence. In 1985, Daniel has a parole hearing. He is released with the condition that he must return to San Francisco to face the kidnapping charges. Only, as no shock to us, he never makes it to his court appearance. Instead, we find Daniel making his way to the South by hitchhiking. Now, these next part of the case, it's going to be moving quite quickly. Again, a lot of times in cases especially like this, the details are very limited. So, as I said, at this point, Daniel is hitchhiking. It's 1985. He's making his way to the South U.S. During his hitchhiking, he meets Donald Hendren. He catches a ride from him. Only he doesn't introduce himself as Daniel Lee Siebert. He introduces himself as Daniel Spence. He decides to kind of take on a whole new persona to rid himself of that criminal history. Well, Donald happens to be on his way to Alabama, specifically the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and Blind. He's going to be an artist and a resident there. And he is actually super intrigued by Daniel and his ability to hold a conversation, plus his passion for art. He offers a place for Daniel while he is at the Institute. Basically, more or less offers him a job, a place to stay, etc. They do actually part ways somewhere in Mississippi. But later on, Daniel does reach back out to Donald and decides to take him up on that offer. So by 1986, which is just that following year from the hitchhiking trip, Daniel is living with Donald in a shared apartment in Talladega. Daniel offers to work for free at the Institute in hopes of being hired full-time. So the Institute agrees without performing any kind of background check. They just let Daniel become one of the instructors. It doesn't take long for Daniel to start dating a student, Sherry Weathers. She's a single mother to 2 young boys, and as I said, she's a student at the Institute, so she has some disabilities. The relationship would actually have been frowned upon, which is not a surprise, but the Institute wouldn't have liked it because Daniel's an instructor, Sherry's a student. Donald decides to move out of that shared apartment because he wants to disassociate himself from Daniel in that not-so-great relationship. We move along to February. We're looking at the same year, 1986. Witnesses say they see Daniel at a local store with Sherry Weathers and her good friend Linda Jarman. They are purchasing beer, and they plan to return to Sherry's place to play cards. At some point later that night, after Linda has already gone back to her place, Daniel goes to visit Linda and asks if he could stay at her place because he and Sherry had some kind of argument. About a week later, on February 24th, Sherry is reported missing because a lot of her friends grew worried because she wasn't showing up for classes. So they report her as missing, and the police conduct a welfare check. Sadly, they discover her and her 2 sons murdered in her apartment. One report, in such a creepy way, states that the bodies were actually stacked on top of each other, and they formed an almost cross shape. I don't know if that's true, but one report did say that. So the police learn of Sherry's connection to Daniel. They learn that they had been dating, so they try to locate him for questioning. While they're searching for Daniel, they learn of another person that was reported missing. It's Sherry's friend, Linda Jarman, the same one that Daniel had visited to see if he could stay there. They visit Linda's apartment and found that she too has been murdered. And this time, her car is missing. And they believe it was most likely stolen by the perpetrator, the person that did the killing. Around this same time, police are able to tie Daniel Spence to his real identity of Daniel Lee Siebert. So we go 6 months. We go for a long 6 months. Daniel stays on the run. There are sightings of him supposedly in places like Ohio, New Jersey, Nevada, California, and even Canada. But then, 6 months, the evidence starts showing up. Linda Jarman's missing vehicle is found in Kentucky, and Daniel's fingerprints are all over it. But this isn't the first solid lead that the police get. This solid lead comes from one of Daniel's friends that's in Las Vegas. For some reason, Daniel calls this friend, and that's when the friend reports it to the police, and they're able to trace the call to somewhere in Tennessee. It's possibly close to the Nashville area, just to give you an idea of location. So they're able to identify that Daniel is an employee at a restaurant that's near where the call was traced. And this is where they finally catch him and apprehend him as their suspect. While Daniel is in custody, he confesses to killing 5 people in Alabama and possibly 12 more across the country. He admits that the murders were strictly for sex and robbery. Detectives believe that Daniel could have also been the person involved in other unsolved homicides, like places in Arizona, California, Nevada, and Florida. But there was never enough evidence to actually link him to those cases. In April of 1987, Daniel Lee Siebert is found guilty of murder, and he is sentenced to death by lethal injection. He actually does try to fight these rulings. He files multiple petitions, but they all fail. And before he's able to undergo the lethal injection, He passes away from pancreatic cancer in 2008. In total, we believe there are 13 confessed murders and at least 10 linked victims, meaning they were able to tie Daniel to 10 cases. Unfortunately, I only have 9 of those names, but still, I will name them. In 1985, we have Gidget Castro, who was 28, and Nesia McElrath, who was 23, both from Los Angeles. February 19th, 1986, Sherry Weathers, the 24-year-old student that Daniel was dating, along with her 2 very young sons, Chad and Joseph. The third victim was Linda Jarman, 33. She was filmed that same night, naked and strangled. The next victim is Linda Odom. She was a 32-year-old cocktail waitress in that same county, and it's believed that she was also one of Daniel's girlfriends at one point. Cheryl Evans is a victim that Daniel admits to murdering. She was a prostitute from the Birmingham area, which is also in Alabama. He picks her up, robs her, murders her, and leaves her body in a garbage dump. The final victim name we have is Beatrice McDougal. She was 57 years old and murdered in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Part of me, what's interesting to me is these are all women. And I'm not entirely sure of the full turnout of the boyfriend situation that he stabbed, but all these are women, but their ages are very different. Their job choices are very different. So it's hard to pinpoint an MO, in my opinion, for Daniel. Kind of all over the board. Now, it is believed that Daniel tried challenging the legal system while he was on death row. He claimed that the cancer medication he was taking for that pancreatic cancer that killed him, he claimed that it would interact with those lethal injection drugs, that it would be basically really bad, unnecessary pain. And it's possible this is what prolonged his execution. One report states that Daniel was actually using Sherry's son's identities after he kind of tried to escape for those 6 months he was on the run. He was actually arrested for assault in New Jersey, but he was using one of her son's identities, so they'd never connected him to anything bad. They never connected him to a warrant or anything. So he served 61 days and then was released. I mean, obviously this case it's pretty bad. It's awful. A lot of lives lost for someone that could have been stopped a long time ago, I feel. I mean, he escaped while he was in prison in California. You know, there were these instances where he got let go because they trusted he would do the right thing. But someone as psychotic as Daniel Lee Siebert, he wasn't going to be doing the right things. Well, I would love to hear your thoughts on today's case. Do you have any other details that you can share? I would love to hear your opinions, feedback, anything you have. Please feel free to reach out. You can contact us on social media. We are on Instagram under Shrouded in Darkness. So you can reach out and connect with us there. Send us your feedback. Send us your case ideas. Send us your questions. And one final note, we always like to acknowledge our sources. So for today's case, we used our research from Wikipedia, Murderpedia, What Makes a Killer, which is a podcast, and Wicked WE. Catch next week's show where we're going to dive into an unsolved Alabama case. We'll catch you next time, ghouls.